or somebody is? Yep. Okay. All right. Well, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome everybody to another 1 Million Cups Westminster. I am one of the volunteer organizers here, Graham Dodge, joined by the rest of the committee, who you'll be introduced to in a moment. Please mute while other presenters are presenting, and then there'll be time for Q&A afterwards in the chat box. You can post your questions there, and we can certainly unmute for discussion should follow-up questions be needed. I want to thank our sponsors, our community sponsor, Magic, my employer, who's a 501c3 nonprofit here in Westminster doing economic development and technology workforce development, and Furnace Hills Coffee. And let me put, I always do this, I always forget to put it in the chat box, but it's furnacehillscoffee.com, and your discount code for 25% off is 1MC Westminster, and that's 25% off your entire order, and that code never goes away until we go to like physical meetings after the pandemic wanes. But for now, you can go on their website and get 25% off your entire order. All right, so Mick Mancuso from our organizing team is going to walk through the core pillars of the program. Mick, you want to share your screen and take it away?
Yep. You guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So first and foremost, these are not pitches. You're not trying to find new clients in these. You are presenting to us your work, what you do, how you do it is one of the big things as well. And focusing on some issues that you may have in terms of how to get your business going, how do you market, things of that nature. The idea is to create a community of small businesses and people who have been around business for a while in Westminster, so that if you have any questions or you have some, who do I need to talk to at City Hall in order to do blah, 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 things of that nature. We call it, it's not a network, it's connections. Well, in actuality, it's a network of connections rather than a network of clients and the such. These are people that you can connect with. Go to a, like we were talking about, go to a coffee shop, have a cup of coffee and talk about solving the problems of the world or solving the problems of your own business. Like I say, it's the important thing that we are attempting to do here is to create a community of people who feel comfortable with each other. Nobody owns 1 Million Cup Westminster. We're all volunteers, and some of us are business savvy, others of us are more tech savvy, let's say. Not all of us are business savvy, but we can bring other elements to bear. We're not paid for what we do at all. We want to be inclusive, as they say here, radically and intentionally inclusive. Nobody is left out. Nobody, like I said, we are tech savvy as well as business savvy, as things of that nature here already. So we are going to meet every week. Starts at Wednesdays at 9 o'clock. Whenever possible, we're going to have 2 presenters, and those presenters must be a business, haven't been in business for less than 5 years. They have issues that they need to deal with, and big things that actually recognizing that you have issues. And then they, as we're listening to their presentation, carefully pick out things that they talk about and form the question of, well, what can we do for you? And it would be, think of specific items as they make their presentation. And also the presenters, if the questioning doesn't seem to be covering one of the issues that you are interested in, please feel free to interrupt the Q&A, and Q&A is going both ways. So, ask your own questions as well. So that's my spiel. Oh, wait, one more. Sorry. Here's we are, here are the organizing team for 1 Million Cups in Westminster. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mick. And if you can end
Hang on. There we go.
Yep. Thank you very much. And for those of you who are new, our presenters, anyone who presents gets this handsome ceramic 1 Million Cups mug. So Hamza and Katie today will be getting those. And then if you attend 5 1 Million Cups in a row, you get one of these travel mugs. There's Tamara. She's showing off hers right now if you're in the grid view. And we have to figure out what to do once you get this, because we're still pretty new. So maybe we'll do a t-shirt after, I don't know, 10 consecutive attendance. All right, so let's get started with our first presenter. Her name is Katie Kirby. She's the executive director of a nonprofit here called Together We Own It, which provides youth mentoring services here in Carroll County, I believe also in Salisbury, but Katie can clarify all that. So Katie, I will hand it off to you. Go ahead and share your screen, and everybody else, please mute while Katie is presenting.
All right, thank you, Grim. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. All right, so as Graham mentioned, my name is Katie Kirby. I'm the executive director and founder at Together We Own It. And Together We Own It, we are a nonprofit organization based in Westminster. We're 501c3. I think we just hit the mark on under 5 years. We're celebrating our 5th anniversary next Friday. But it wasn't until December of 2017, after I'd graduated college, that I moved the organization back to my hometown here in Westminster. So we're right on John Street downtown. So what we do as an organization, we serve children and families impacted by trauma. As an organization, we don't define what trauma is for our families, but the majority of the kids that we work with have been impacted by physical, emotional, sexual abuse, or neglect, living in poverty, and often with mental health, mental illness. We do conduct a risk needs assessment for all of our families, and we've identified that our students and families score on average of 40% or higher on our risk needs assessment, which assesses housing, education, mental health, and substance use. So our families have been homeless, our kids are being held back in school or receive special education services. They have diagnoses, and often are themselves or living in homes where there's substance abuse or violence. So on average, we serve roughly 700 individuals each year. Those are children and parents, and those are our Carroll County families. This year, because of COVID, we've served over 3,000. And that was something very unanticipated, obviously, in the beginning of the year, but something that we've recognized that our capacity to serve is much larger than we ever anticipated. And we've been able to adapt in the middle of a pandemic to continue to serve some of our most vulnerable neighbors. So what we do with all of those kiddos, we provide basic necessities first and foremost. So we conduct that risk needs assessment. We recognize and feel very strongly that it's hard to ask our families and our children to overcome obstacles when there's no food on the table, clothes on their back. Just to show up at school without having breakfast is a challenge for many of our kids. And so right off the bat, we try to alleviate those natural stressors so that our kids and families can move from just barely surviving really to ones that are thriving. That would be our biggest program. I would say all of those 700 that we serve about each year are benefiting from this program, and then several others only come to us for these needs. Another big program that we have here in Carroll is our group mentoring programs. So we have Rise Up and we have Discover You. We serve children ages 5 to 18. And those programs are really to build peer support, build positive relationships with trusted adults that they might not have anywhere else. And as a team, we help to identify the strengths of our kids and help them work towards goals. So we always start from a place of now what? the experiences and the circumstances that you were born into, or that was generational, or that you've been impacted by, often really suck. And we come from a place of, but this isn't the end game, right? Like there's always a better tomorrow. We can help strive for a better outcome for you and for your family. And so that's where we start with all of our kids. We receive many of our referrals from the Department of Juvenile Services, social services, the school system, other agencies, and then self-referrals from parents and children as well. And then our newest program that we've added is recognizing that we can only serve our kids as well as we can impact and support their parents. And so our restorative parenting curriculum supports families to bridge relationships after trauma occurs. So getting right into the challenges, funding is obviously a huge need. I kind of tried to break it down from there of why I feel funding and kind of the sub goals of funding. Community awareness, like when I grew up here in Westminster, I didn't recognize the poverty that existed in our community. I never realized that my school bus picked up at the homeless shelter. And so just being aware of the needs of our community from a community perspective, I think is really important and something that we struggle to bring that awareness. And then being able to demonstrate our outcomes and the positive support that we can provide, because we are a new program and because our kids are still kids, we have a really hard time showing the outcomes and kind of the longitudinal impact that we have here in our community. And then also business relationships, so identifying community partners. This was our goal, our strategic goal with our board for 2020, and obviously it was kind of stunted with the pandemic. I'm currently in Leadership Carroll as kind of a way to initiate some of these better relationships in our local community. So we're working towards that, but definitely a barrier for us. And then the last one is engagement. So from more of the program side, obviously COVID has made a strong impact on this, but we have a lot of largely underutilized programs. So getting kids in our door, we realized in the middle of the pandemic, these 3,000 families that we weren't serving previously, how do we engage those families all year long, not just in a crisis response method? And so we've also found that community programs here youth programs here in Carroll are very siloed. So being able to integrate youth programs so kids aren't falling through the cracks is a goal of ours in a way that we feel like we could better engage with families. So with that, I put my contact information and my email address on our website if anybody wants to check it out or ask any questions. I told Graham before this, I'm not used to this kind of presentation. I'm used to going into kind of our story and how we got started and what we do. So there was a really cool highlight in the Carroll magazine last month. So feel free to check it out if you want kind of that background story, but I'm also always happy to share that as well.
Thank you very much, Katie. Excellent presentation. If you could end sharing your screen, there you go. So we do have some questions, and we have some also comments and resources that are being posted here. Josh Ambrose from McDaniel College has posted a couple of links here as resources that you and other folks in public art, cultural development, and community development might be interested in. And Gilbert says, I have been following Together We Own It very closely. Very impressive. Great job this year, Katie. The increase in those you serve has drastically increased. What is the definition of served? Did you decrease staff to serve such an increase in those that you serve?
Yeah, so we define a family has been served if we've connected them with our programs and resources, or we have connected them with community resources. So as an organization, we hope to be a hub of resources because we are more of a community center environment. We make several referrals out to other community organizations. So if we can't serve a family, we'll connect you with someone that can. And so the number that we've served this year, those 3,000 are unique individuals. The majority of those families that we served this year was in providing groceries delivery to their doorstep each week, March through May. And that was that big number comes from. The 700 number that we typically serve on any given year is largely those basic necessities coming into our pantry. We have a mobile trailer that it's set up like a boutique, takes donated items that are on shelves and hung on racks. To give more of a personal connection and not just a grocery or a trash bag of donations. We take those out into the community. So the large number that we serve is providing basic necessities, but a portion of that is also in our physical programs or connecting with resources as well. And we did hire additional staff this year. We received some CARES Act funding to be able to provide a distance learning support staff for our kids that were doing virtual learning. We did an in-person program. And then we also hired someone to do some grant writing for us.
Wow, that's great, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. I stuck in some other recommendations. I don't know if you've connected with them, but I'll try and catch up with you later.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, Anne's referring to taking flyers to DSS, but they probably are aware of you. She's commenting.
Yeah.
All right.
We do.
And Valerie Giovanni, who was one of our organizing volunteers and the city manager for Ting here in Westminster, crazy fast internet, the fastest internet in the state of Maryland, I'll have you know. She wants to know, how do program participants get referred to you for services? And then what happened to your long hair?
And I will add one of Together We Own It's biggest supporters. We are run by Crazy Fast Internet here at Together We Own It. So I'll start with my hair. I cut off 12 inches or more last week for Giving Tuesday. We raised over, actually now we've raised over, the final count's over $10,000 for our programs in our community. And there were several stages of that, including I turned my hair blue last week. I cut off 12 inches. I tattooed Own It on my body. And I sang karaoke live on Facebook as we hit our thresholds. So anything to raise awareness for our kids. How do people get involved and referred to our services? We have partnerships with the school system. Just this morning, I met with their ESOL team. So again, just trying to get into the school system, PPWs, people personnel workers, the counselors. We have a referral on our website. As I mentioned, anyone can refer. We do have certain partnerships. We're funded through the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. And so we, through that funding, have designated programs for our juvenile service kids. We work with the local court system, the state's attorney's office, and DJS to provide diversion and reentry services for kids as an alternative to detention and as kids coming back into our community from detention. So we provide those services, but we receive referrals from many, many, many organizations, including the Department of Social Services for our foster kids that are staying in county. We're also part of the discharge kind of process at Carroll Hospital for the psychiatric unit. Those that are there for behavioral health typically come into our program as they're transitioning back home.
And I actually have a follow-up question about you cutting your hair, because you've also walked 100 miles, right, to raise awareness.
Yes, I did in October. I walked 100 miles to raise awareness. We had 100 missing children or more in the state of Maryland. And several of those kiddos are ours here from Carroll that people just aren't aware of. They just don't talk about it. We've had a kid missing from Carroll since April. She's found and she's back home. But I did walk 100 miles to just kind of drum up awareness and let people know that these kiddos do exist in Carroll. I feel like many people think a lot of these issues are Baltimore City issues, and that if they're here, they're coming here from Baltimore, but they're really rooted in our community. So,
well, and what I wanted to ask you was, you seem to be the queen of sort of these, I don't know if it's publicity stunt is the right word for it or not, but I want to say it's been a trend since the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge on Facebook that nonprofits can use some of these types of stunts to create awareness and to obviously generate funding. Is this something that is like an official tactic in the nonprofit world that you're seeing? As someone who is now also in a nonprofit, I'm curious to kind of learn from your experience.
Yeah, so my background, I've worked in many, young, but I've done many different internships and work experience. I've worked on the program side, boots on the ground, similar to what we do now. I've also worked for the United Way of the Lower Eastern Shore, and I worked for the Community Foundation when I was in Salisbury as well. So I kind of have a circulating picture of nonprofits. I don't know if it's a spoken role, but it does seem to be kind of the new trend. You're right, since the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I can't tell you how many times I have Googled things like the ice bucket challenge, like how can we drum up awareness? It seems that people are intrigued by how crazy you can get for your cause. So I am always willing.
Okay, so and then Tina, I'll get to your question at the end because that is sort of our general question at the end, and sometimes I forget, so thank you for reminding me. But Josh from McDaniel College also asks, what do you see as the biggest differentiator in your model from the Boys and Girls Club of America and YMCA and other long-established youth programs?
Yeah, absolutely. We get this question more than any other question. And I think that the biggest differentiating piece is that we don't have a center here where we serve hundreds of kiddos. We have programs where we serve very small groups. Our kiddos really need more one-on-one individual program attention and support, and really breaking down that relationship piece that our kids are really here for survival. All of our, currently all of our boys that are in our programs have been impacted by sexual abuse in some way. And that is a more kind of defined trauma that we have to be able to tackle in a small group setting that our kids can really feel trusted and supported to share those really impactful moments and relate and connect with each other. Many of our kids don't feel comfortable walking into those larger program settings. And our goal for some of our kids is to get back to make sure that they can feel comfortable walking into like our local Boys and Girls Club. We've met with them and have some of the kids that needed more specific services and more one-on-one attention had come from the Boys and Girls Club to our programs. And we've also referred back for some of our kids that really don't need the one-on-one support. They just need to be somewhere safe after school.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Ann Gilbert also asks, have you connected with Get Connected in Carroll County Public Schools and some of the local therapy centers like Hope Health?
I'm not familiar with Hope Health, but we do partner with the school system. And then also we work closely with Get Connected to get our resources out there. We are trying to, we've kind of hit this, I feel like, new phase where a lot of people at least have heard of us by now, but maybe don't know exactly what we do or where kind of they fit into the services that we provide. Certainly would I think need to build some more of those relationships to get more out there. Like our big organizations like CCYSB and the school system, they're familiar and often referring, but some of our more smaller private agencies we aren't as connected with.
Okay, great. Jonathan Wheatman, attorney at law, fellow organizer of 1 Million Cups and founder of the Entrepreneur Store, Westminster, says, Katie, thanks for what you do. Tamar Osterman from Maryland Economic Development is pointing you to a resource. This is the state's community investment tax credit awarding allocations for state credits for use as incentives to attract contributions from individuals and businesses to benefit local projects and services like yours. Josh Ambrose from McDaniel College says he appreciates that earlier description, Katie, about how you differentiate yourself. Would love to see that focus on one-on-one mentorship, individualized attention in your web materials, aka subheading beneath your banner. Just a thought.
Well, can I speak to that really quickly? I'm sorry.
Obviously, yes.
No, that's a great thought. We have really struggled in being able to articulate the needs of our community and our kids without exploiting their circumstances. And we kind of balance this fine line of how do we let people know how we're different and what we specifically do for our community without really putting out there like what I had shared before. I wouldn't blast that out. But it does make people stop and think like, oh, there's this real need in our community for these kids. And looking at the number of kids that we have served, there's a large majority in our community that are impacted by trauma. And so it's a great thought to put it on our website for sure. We're also looking to potentially put some sort of video together that kind of obviously shields the identity of our kids, but allows them to kind of be the voice and share their story so that we can better articulate through them really what the message is and what we do here at Together We Own It. So I appreciate that thought.
Excellent. Councilwoman Ann Gilbert added a detail about, she described Hope Health some more there for you if you want to check that out in the chat. And then also, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, you have a program within Together We Own It called Rise Up. Is that correct?
We do. We have several programs within the umbrella of Together We Own It. We have Rise Up and Discover You. Those are our mentoring programs. Rise Up's our teenage program for 12 to 18, and Discover You's for our elementary students, 5 to 11. We have our Good Stuff program. That's our mobile trailer, our basic necessities program. Many people, when we got started here in Carroll, were confused what the difference was between Together We Own It and Rise Up. We were challenged in the beginning to articulate how we were one organization with several programs underneath of us. I think that we're starting to get to that point. It's really helpful that we've moved this year into a much larger location. We have now 4,400 square feet instead of the 2 locations that we had previously. All of our programs now are housed under one roof in our Center for Strength and Development. So when families come in, they can access all of our programs right here and be connected more seamlessly than having to go from one program location to another.
I'll just jump to the next question here and skip some of the other comments, which you can see as well. But Tina Thomas, co-founder of Infinite Love Project, one of our very first presenter at 1 Million Cups, asks, are you working with a resource that can address the culture/circumstance that created the trauma to work with the adults in the scenario?
Yeah, so we have more recently realized that we as an organization, in order to really benefit our kiddos, we have to be able to support parents. Full kind of transparency. There have been many instances, and I can remember when I started the organization at 19, being really, really frustrated with parents and family members who I was looking at these little children and thinking, how could you ever, want to hurt your child, or how could you ever choose drugs over your child? And I didn't understand at 19, and now at 24, I'm a little bit more rehearsed. But I now understand that that these parents are going through their own trauma, and they have unresolved childhood trauma that hasn't been addressed yet. And they're trying the best they can to raise children. And so we've realized that the best way we can support our children is to support the families. We have more recently, we've always been based in restorative practices. If you're not familiar, I highly recommend checking it out. The school system uses it often. But we're based in restorative practices. We've added a restorative trainer to our team so we can train other community organizations in restorative justice. And we're also starting a restorative parenting group. So we're pulling in the parents who often sit in front of me and think that they're alone and that nobody understands, to pull them together to have that support to help break down and rebuild those relationships with their children after trauma. And then from an organization standpoint, we refer many of our families to the Maryland Coalition of Families, which is a peer support program for parents as they're navigating mental health and trauma.
You're muted, Mick. I see you talking, and I think we lost Graham.
Yeah, that's what I just said. It looked like he was trying to get back in, and then he dropped off away again.
All right, I'm back. Sorry.
There he is.
All right. Yes, my computer crashed. The computer I've been trying to diagnose. So, all right. And what time are we at now? We're at 9:28. Okay, so I think we have enough time to ask you, Katie, what can our community do for you?
Yeah. It's a loaded question. I feel like some of our biggest needs are just kind of, we always say, like, sharing the Own It message, like being trauma informed in your approach when you meet with or in whatever business you do when you come across families. We always say, like, you never know where a family's coming from. So just kind of like maintaining our messaging and supporting our community as we can collaboratively do that, we can be better off. As an organization, we always need volunteers, mentors. We're always looking for teenagers for opportunities for local businesses or just individuals to come in and share their skills or talent with our kids. Those ways that we can build relationships. We've learned that for some of, like, our boys group, we've connected with them through music. So we have a local artist who comes in and has taught them how to produce music. And there's a Rise Up rap somewhere on the internet. I do rap in that song. Feel free to check it out. But just continuing to connect with us and share our message and see if there's any way that your business can partner with us or support our kids as they enter into adulthood.
Thank you very much, Katie. Excellent presentation. If there's any more questions in the chat, we will save that for you and send it to you. And you can also get the other comments that are in there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you again. And we are getting ready here for our next presentation. I'll just say again real quick that if you are new here, if you attend 5 times in a row, you get one of these mugs. If you present, you get one of these mugs. And if you attend more than maybe 10 times in a row, we'll get you a 1 Million Cups t-shirt. We are sponsored by our community sponsor, Magic, local nonprofit here in Westminster doing economic development work, and Furnace Hills Coffee, who is offering a 25% discount on all the coffee, all your online orders on furnacehillscoffee.com. The code is 1MC Westminster. It should be in the chat box. If you joined after it was posted, let me know and I'll repost it. Okay, so now we're getting ready for our next presenter, Hamza Hassan, who is the founder of RoboTrials, a Baltimore-based startup that is working in clinical trial enrollment. Hassan, go ahead and take it away. Everybody else, please mute while Hassan is presenting, while Hamza is presenting.
Thanks, Graham. And thank you all for joining today. I'm going to share my screen, so let me know when you can see it.
We see it.
Cool.
That's good.
So my name is Hamza Hassan, and I'm the founder and CEO of RoboTrials. RoboTrials is aiming to commercialize its proprietary trial eligibility screening system, also known as TESS. TESS standardizes, digitizes, and automates the clinical trial eligibility screening and enrollment process. So before I tell you more about RoboTrials, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself and how TESS was created. I previously worked for the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in the Department of Radiation Oncology and Molecular Radiation Sciences as the lead study coordinator for 13 clinical trials. In this role, one of my responsibilities was to screen patients for eligibility and enroll them onto clinical trials. The first time I screened a patient, I immediately noticed that the process was very antiquated since it was done on paper, and that with my knowledge of programming, I could easily standardize, digitize, and automate the process. So at that point, I wrote a few lines of code, showed it to my supervisor, and asked him if he thought it would be useful to streamline the process. And my supervisor was very supportive, and he gave me some good feedback, so I ended up proceeding with the development of the software. Since I was working in a setting with many experienced clinical trial professionals that were constantly screening patients, I was able to get immediate feedback to optimize tests for the actual workflow. And with the support of the department, I was able to validate tests by using it to enroll a real patient on a real clinical trial. In the months following this, I developed tests for 29 clinical trials, and since then, tests has been used to screen hundreds of patients. So eligibility screening is required for every clinical trial enrollment, and the process is widely documented using paper eligibility checklists, which are stored in physical patient binders for the course of each trial. There are currently more than 50,000 clinical trials actively recruiting patients around the world, and some of these trials have to screen thousands and sometimes even tens of thousands of patients. In my experience working as a study coordinator, I found that eligibility screening can take up to a few hours for each patient screened, and each time up to an hour can be spent on the administrative parts of the process. TESS takes clinical staff member inputs and makes an eligibility determination based on a customized algorithm for a clinical trial's unique eligibility criteria, and automates the entire administrative workflow that would normally be performed, which saves up to an hour per patient screened. A recent study performed by researchers from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health found that the median cost for clinical trials that support FDA approvals is $19 million, and the average total cost for bringing a new drug to market is estimated to be between $2 and $3 billion. Although clinical trials only account for a fraction of the total cost, they are the pivotal step required for bringing medical products to market. And according to a recent publication by Harvard Business School, 80% of clinical trials fail to meet their enrollment goals. In the setting of COVID-19 vaccine research, to be considered for an emergency use authorization, or EUA, the FDA is requiring 2 months of safety data after the 15,000th patient is dosed with a vaccine candidate. And to dose 15,000 patients in a randomized trial, about 60,000 patients would need to be screened. And this is all while many clinical trial site staff are working remotely. With the eligibility screening and enrollment process being such a widespread and costly bottleneck, there's a huge opportunity to implement tests at a large scale to streamline eligibility screening and tackle this important bottleneck. So with this knowledge in mind, I expressed interest to Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures in commercializing the technology, and they recommended that I participate in the Johns Hopkins and National Science Foundation's Innovation Corps program. And the iCorps program was actually really valuable for me. It pushed me to speak with many leaders across the industry, and I was able to identify the most important value propositions and found that more than half of the people I spoke with wanted to demo the software, and some have even agreed to pilot it. So in summary, starting in Q1 of 2021, RoboTrials is aiming to implement tests at a large scale to save up to 1 hour of labor costs per patient screened, to potentially shorten time to market for medical products, to improve quality by preventing misenrollments through the implementation of a programmatic checkpoint for eligibility, to reduce source data verification costs by standardizing the documentation, to digitize the eligibility screening process to allow site staff to work remotely during the pandemic, and last and most importantly, to improve patient experience by getting them enrolled on clinical trials faster to get them their treatments faster. Our next steps include finalizing the contract with Johns Hopkins, acquiring funding, making strategic hires, and figuring out which clients to proceed with as our early adopters. And these are the references that I used for the to make the presentation, and that concludes my talk. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Hamza. And so we've got some comments pouring in. Let's see here. Tamar Osterman from Maryland Economic Development wants to know, do you have an advisory board?
So Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures is actually helping with the advising. And I've connected with many people through the iCorps program that have given me various pieces of advice for how to proceed with commercialization, how to really optimize it to fit a commercial environment, and how to speak with the people who would be the decision makers. But I don't have a formal advisory board within the company as of yet.
And let's see, Josh Ambrose from McDaniel College asks or says, nice work, thanks for sharing. How does your software processing differ from other healthcare agencies that are investing heavily in digitizing their processes?
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so the unique part about tests is that it uses an eligibility determination algorithm to determine if patients are eligible and uses that as a checkpoint to automate the workflow. So every other software on the market right now either is a data entry system that requires a human to enter if a patient is eligible or ineligible, or it's a pre-screening software that presents clinicians with potential patients. So there's nothing that automates the actual eligibility screening and enrollment process.
And also, Hamza, if you can stop sharing your screen so that
sure.
we can see the attendees here.
Yep.
Let's see, our next question is from Tina Thomas, founder of Infinite Love Project. Who is your primary target market, the pharma industry or hospitals?
So there are three target markets. The first would be clinical research organizations, which run clinical trials for sponsors, such as pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, and biotechnology companies. The second target market would be the sponsors themselves, so pharma, biotech, and medical device companies. And the third would be large academic research institutions who are actually running the trials.
Got it. Okay. Could you allow Yashil, I hope I'm pronouncing Yashil or Yashil Sukardeep is asking, could you elaborate on your algorithms? How does AI fit in with your data processing streams?
Yeah, so how TEST works is it uses a customized algorithm for each clinical trial, and it makes an eligibility determination. if a patient is eligible or ineligible. If the patient is determined to be ineligible, then it proceeds with the workflow that would be required if the patient was ineligible. And if the patient is determined to be eligible, it proceeds with the workflow that would be required if the patient was eligible. So it can send out emails, make phone calls, and in the future, it will be able to connect directly with electronic medical record systems to pull in information automatically if you would enter an MRN, medical record number, for a specific patient.
And so what is I'm asking this question, what is
Yep.
the pain point that you're solving then for the clinical trial and pharma industries in this case? Is it just the speed at which they can get people enrolled, or is there something else to the process that you're streamlining?
Yeah, so there are three aspects to this. So the first would be the direct labor cost saving and the time saved for clinicians. So clinicians don't have to spend an hour on the administrative work. Instead, they can spend time with their patients and actually help them in other ways. The second pain point is reducing time to market. So a recent study by McKinsey showed that if you are first to market within a drug class, that you will get 10% more sales than if you were second to market. And in competitive environments like COVID vaccine research, the enrollment process is the bottleneck. For example, the FDA is requiring 15,000 patients to be dosed before the 2-month period of safety data collection begins. So the enrollment process really is the bottleneck, and shortening the time to market really provides significant value for companies. The third aspect would be actually improving the quality of eligibility screening so that there aren't misenrollments. Sponsors don't have to spend significant amount of time verifying eligibility, and it essentially just is the optimal workflow for eligibility screening, which is done on paper right now.
And we have a question here from Mark Weingram. Hi, Hamza. You referenced that the piece of the market for which TESS is designed is small. Do you believe this piece is big enough to obtain venture returns, or do your commercialization advisors suggest alternative sources of capitalization in order to fund the business? Great question.
Yeah, so I wouldn't consider the market to be small. So there are actually 50,000 clinical trials actively enrolling patients around the world. And for each clinical trial, saving 1 hour of time per patient screened is really significant. For a large COVID vaccine trial where 60,000 patients need to be screened, just the time saving alone is 30 years of full-time work. So that's quite a significant value. And I think that once we get into that large phase 3 market, we will easily be able to obtain venture capital funding.
And you brought up COVID. Does the acceleration of the recent example with the COVID vaccine, does that create a challenge or an opportunity for you in terms of maybe, like as I would see it, maybe it's an opportunity in that you're helping to speed up the process effectively. And I know in speaking with you before that there are some concerns of perception that the CROs don't want to be perceived as cutting corners or speeding up. So that's like a marketing challenge right there. But then is there almost like is there like a phase, like a phase that's emerging, like a 2.5 or a 3.5 phase that is coming out of this accelerated process? Is it changing the landscape for you at all, given the circumstance?
Yeah. So I think the entire biopharma industry has a change in landscape ongoing right now, with everything becoming digitalized, everyone starting to work from home. Pretty much every single company is having to make a huge transformation. And it is kind of like a double-edged sword with the CROs, because one, they want to charge for the billable hours, but they become more efficient and they have the competitive advantage over other CROs. So that is a little bit of a challenge, and pitching it the right way, finding the right people to talk to is a difficulty that we'll have in the future. But I think overall, this will really have like significant value propositions for each party and each target market that we have. So I think that the digitalization going on right now is really going to help us, especially since we have a validated product that's been used to enroll patients already, and some of the other products that are emerging are developing it in a kind of compartment outside of the clinical space and then trying to implement their software in clinical.
And then, can you speak at all to what you've learned through the I-Corps program about that perception from CROs about not wanting to be perceived as like they're cutting corners by speeding things up? So like how you express your value proposition in that regard needs to be sort of delicately put, right?
Yeah, so I think there's different sets of value propositions I need to present to different target markets. So with CROs, I've found that it can go either way with the leaders in the industry. Some of them think that it'll get them less money because they can charge less billable hours for their work. They make a lot of their money off of source data verification with CRAs, clinical research associates, going out to clinical trial sites and actually verifying that everything was done according to how it was supposed to be done. But I think it's really a matter of pitching it the right way to the person you're speaking to and figuring out what they need and asking the right questions before you present the value propositions.
Excellent. Well, if there's no other questions from the group here, I will ask you then, what can we as a community do for you? Where do you need some help or resources?
Yeah, so I think just being connected with anyone who's running large clinical trials would be really helpful. Right now we have some people lined up who are interested in the software who are actually running large trials, but it's right now at this stage, I think it's the matter of finding the right client that would be feasible to attain for us. Some clients will want 3 full-time people around the clock to be able to support the software. And as a startup, that's very resource intensive. So I think it's really a matter of finding the right client, and being connected with anyone who's running large trials would be really helpful for us.
And I don't know off the top of my head if there are any CROs in Maryland. I know that there's AstraZeneca has big offices here. Tamar, are you familiar with any other pharma or CROs in Maryland? They're doing business, they're active.
We have lots of CROs in Maryland.
Okay.
Hamza, I'm going to put a link to the Maryland Department of Commerce's biohealth directory. It's an online directory, and you can do a search for CROs in there. So hang on a sec while I find that.
And Tina Thomas from Infinite Love Project is asking, are you able to work with National Institutes of Health at all? Are you connected with them or working with them?
So I'm actually not connected with them, but this software can be applied to any clinical trial. And the NIH is one of the biggest sponsors for clinical trials. So I think that they would really be able to benefit from this.
Tina, do you have a connection there at NIH? And then there's the link Tamara just posted there for you in the chat box. Okay. And then do you have a live demo yet on your, Tina says she may have a connection. She'll email you.
Awesome.
We'll connect the two of you guys. Do you have a live demo that people can test or anything like that on your website, or nothing? Is there anything, I guess it wouldn't be relevant to an average user.
Yeah, so there is a live demo. So in order to access the live demo, you would have to register and send an email to the email that would pop up, and then I can give you access to the demo at that point.
Okay, great. Tamar Osterman from Maryland Economic Development is also saying, please reach out to the Director of Maryland's Commerce Biohealth Office, Dr. Ulana Desiderio, and she provides the email address for them as well.
Sure, thank you.
It's Yeah, it's Uliana. Here's her LinkedIn.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamara.
Yeah, I'll reach out to her.
All right. Well, any other questions? Anybody, we can just unmute if you want to jump in, make a comment, or have a question. Otherwise, we'll wrap things up. All right. Well, Hamza, great job. And
Thank
Katie,
you.
again, as well. Katie, great job. Very thought-provoking session today. So I will now turn it over to Val to go ahead and wrap up this meeting. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you to our participants today. Lovely learning some new stuff about what's going on right around here. And thanks again for everyone who came back. I see so many familiar faces and some new faces, which is always delightful. Next week will be our last 1MC of the calendar year, and we will have Voice Vibes as well as Everest Master. So that'll be fun. And then we'll all take a little holiday break and be back in January. If you've been considering applying for 1MC, now's the perfect time to do it. We need to start scheduling our January sessions, and we'd love to hear what you've got in store for us. So everyone have a lovely week, and we will see you next week.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I'll add that, you know, at some point when COVID permits, we'll try to start doing these in person. And that'll also lend itself to more of the sort of networking of, you know, or connecting, I should say, in terms of, you know, meeting over coffee and having time before and after the meeting to just sort of socialize. That is typical for a 1 Million Cups meeting, but which is kind of lost in this virtual context right now. But certainly, if anybody else, you know, ever wants to comment or just maybe we'll create like a little end if we have time like today to say, you know, hey, if anybody else here wants to make any announcements or something in their community on, you know, for whatever organization they're with, we can start to try to carve out that time as well for people. So please, by all means, let us know feedback for how we're doing in terms of any suggestions on things that we can be doing differently to help the attendees feel like they're connecting more. So that's what this is all about. So thank you again, everybody. Have a good one.
Happy Wednesday.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye.